Part 80. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 791. After returning for a short stay, they left again. Although the girls on the building were a little reluctant to leave, they finally reunited and warmed up. The longing in their hearts was relieved and the atmosphere became lively. In the blink of an eye, Su Buling had been gone for 3 days, and the flying snow in the sky stopped, revealing the warm winter sun. Xiao Xianger had been worrying about Zioan in the past few days. Now that Zioan went out with Su Buling to relax, she felt a little more at ease. She opened the table with her sisters on the deck and played mahjong in the winter Sunday. Song Yafu and Chu Chu had already entered the door. Naturally, they took the role of younger sisters seriously, standing by and watching, and occasionally trying their hand at the table. On the shore outside the boat, the snow has not yet melted. Manzi and Qingyi were fishing together, with 2 dogs and a goose squatting next to them. Nightingale held a bunch of newly purchased copies of the Sword Master Zulu, The Golden Gun is Undefeated, and leaned under the willow tree to review it carefully. Zhu Manzi was originally sitting alone on the boat fishing. Now with company, he became much more active. He took the fishing rod and wrote a poem in a decent manner. Birds have disappeared from thousands of mountains, and human traces have disappeared from thousands of paths. I am alone in a boat with a koi raincoat, fishing alone in the snow in the cold river. How about this poem on a clear night? In the past, Zhu Manzi was fishing alone on the shore. Kui Zioan read this poem after seeing it. Because of the lofty artistic conception, Manzi actually remembered it. It's just that Ning Qingyi wasn't interested in poetry and poetry. She put the big fat fish she had just caught into the fish basket and said calmly, "If you can't catch fish, you can't catch fish. You're fishing alone in Hanjiangxiu. Why do you say it sounds so nice? Hey." Zhu Manzi looked down at his empty fish basket and said, slightly dissatisfied, "You should be calm when fishing and not seek utilitarianism. The important thing is the process rather than the result. I just like the artistic conception of fishing, but I don't really want to catch the fish. Hey, I bit the bait, it seems to be a big guy." While he was talking, the fish float on the water moved. Zhu Manzi immediately became very energetic and began to walk the fish skillfully. Ning Qingyi rolled her eyes and didn't bother to pay attention. After continuing to throw the pole, her eyes turned to the river bank under the warm sun. The building ship was docked outside Yueyang City, and there were Ziliang troops stationed nearby. There had been a truce for several months, and the trade routes had recovered somewhat. People from the Jianghu could occasionally be seen escorting convoys passing by on the official roads. Ning Qingyi looked at it for a moment, but before the big fish came up from the branches, a fast horse suddenly came running from the shore, with a scout from the Ziliang army sitting on it. Nightingale, who was leaning next to him, closed his book upon seeing this, raised his hand to let the scout come to him, and asked, "What's up?" Nightingale is Su Buling's personal secretary. In the army, she is equivalent to Su Buling's staff, and her rank is still very high. The scout got off his horse, came to the front and raised his hand to salute. Just now outside the military camp, a woman from the Jianghu community stopped and asked. The woman said she came to see His Highness the Crown Prince. She did not identify herself, but only said that she knew His Highness the Crown Prince. Seeing that the girl was extremely beautiful in her humble position, she did not dare to expel her. "Come and ask." An extremely handsome woman from the world? Looking for Su Buletinling? When Ning Qingyi and Zhu Manzi heard this, they both turned their heads, with suspicious looks in their eyes. Nightingale was also quite surprised. She actually didn't know how many women there were outside her young master, so she frowned and asked, "What does it look like?" The scout recalled it for a moment and said seriously, "He is tall, wearing ordinary military uniforms, and has a silver scimitar with a bead in its mouth and a whip on his waist." It does not look like an ordinary weapon. Chen Xining. Before the scout finished speaking, Ning Qingyi stood up and said with some surprise. Why did she come here? Nightingale was equally at a loss. Chen Xining was the third princess of South Vietnam. Now that South Vietnam had surrendered, Chen Xining was demoted to the title of princess. She should have followed Chen Jin to Chang'an City to join the feudal vassal. Why did she come here? Seeing the two people's reactions, Zhu Manzi stood up and approached Ning Qingyi, asking. Xiaoning, isn't Chen Xining the one who is better than me in everything and older than me as you said? That's it, you're probably going to be the youngest. Before Zhu Manzi could figure out the situation, Ning Qingyi and Nightingale followed the scouts to the nearby military camp. Zhu Manzi couldn't think of fishing at this time, so he quickly dropped his fishing rod and trotted over. Outside Yueyang City, more than 100,000 soldiers and horses are stationed here. The war will not start until spring. Preparations are being made around the military camp, including building siege equipment, troop transport ships, etc. The military discipline of the Ziliang army is very strict. Even if it is not a war, it is still solemn and solemn. The black flags are flapping in the wind. Apart from the sound of horses' hooves and armor rubbing against each other, there is basically no human noise in the military camp. A temporary garrison wall was built outside the military camp. Chen Xining was standing outside the cordon holding her horse. Her long blue and white dress was replaced by a common military uniform in the Central Plains. She looked quite heroic with her leggings and wrist guards. At this time, he stood on tiptoes and looked at the military camp that stretched to the end of his field of vision with a bit of amazement. Chen Xining grew up in South Vietnam. As a noble princess, she has naturally seen military camps, but this is the first time she has seen such a large and neat one. Before coming, Chen Xining was still a little regretful about South Vietnam's acceptance of the land as a vassal. She felt that if her father had not been murdered by gangsters, South Vietnam would not be in the current situation. But after seeing the military camp with more than 100,000 people stationed in front of him, Chen Xining realized that his previous ideas were too naive. Dayo really wanted to mobilize the whole country to attack South Vietnam, but South Vietnam had no chance of winning. He had never done that before, and just because there are strong enemies in the north, there is not much use in defeating them. In the military camp, there are 10,000 tiger and horse riders in armor. At this time, a small team is training. The tall horses are fully armored. There are knights like iron towers sitting on them. Even their faces are covered tightly, leaving only the eyes. A gap. Just one person and one horse marching. There was a steel fortress. Chen Xining could not imagine how spectacular the scene of thousands or even tens of thousands of horsemen charging into the formation was. After waiting for a moment outside the military camp, the sound of horse hooves was heard in the distance. Chen Xining came back to her senses and turned to look around. When she saw Nightingale and Ning Qingyi, she suddenly became a little cautious. She quickly pressed back, pretending to be calm as usual, and raised her hand to wave. Miss Ning, sister yet? The two little snakes heard the sound and seemed to know that they would have delicious food soon. They both got out of Chen Xining's arms and looked around. The weather in South Vietnam is hot and not too cold in winter, but this is not the case in Chu Di. During the cold winter season with blizzards, the temperature is extremely low. The two little snakes would freeze to death if they did not hibernate, so they could only hide in Chen Xining's arms. It relies on body temperature to keep warm, but even so, it looks a little wilted. After Nightingale and Ning Qingyi confirmed that it was Chen Xining, although they were doubtful, they still showed joy and said remotely, "Miss Chen." Chen Xining led the horse forward, and was about to say something. Suddenly, he found that there was a little girl following behind the two of them. She was as round as a porcelain doll, with big eyes that looked very spiritual. She was young, and her breasts were very big. It was scary. While trotting while holding up the hem of her skirt, the rough waves made people worry that the little girl lost her center of gravity and fell. Chen Xining raised her eyebrows and looked down at herself. Feeling that she was inferior, she subconsciously straightened up, walked forward and said with a smile. "Long time no see, you two, who is this girl?" When Zhu Manzi discovered a new rival in love, he must not show any cowardice. He was about to introduce himself. "I am the direct descendant of the Zhu family in Yuzhu, the eldest granddaughter of the sword master Zhu Zhoushan, the sixth legitimate daughter of the sword master Zhu Zhou, and a mixed number given by Jianghu people as the Fenhe sword god." But before she opened her mouth, Ning Qingyi took the lead and introduced. "Her name is Zhu Manzi, a friend I met in Chang'an." "Why did Miss Chen come here?" Zhu Manzi choked on his words and skipped the topic. It was a bit awkward to forcefully introduce himself, so he could only nod and stand behind to listen. When asked about the purpose of her visit, Chen Xining was obviously a little panicked. She definitely didn't dare to tell anyone about her father's plan to get married. She just used the excuse she had thought of on the way and explained. After Sister Zhongli left, a king and a Baicha didn't think about food and kept craving for Sister Zhongli's rations. "Now that Nanyu and Dayu have become a family, I can be considered a member of Dayu. Anyway, I have to go to Chang'an. Follow me." The procession was boring, so I took Ah Ching and Ah Bai through early. "You don't mind me coming uninvited, right?" Ms. Chen's words are serious. "We are all friends, why should we say such unintentional words?" Ning Qingyi actually quite believed Chen Xining's explanation, because the two little snakes opened their mouths and cried for food, so they ran towards the boat. Now that South Vietnam has surrendered, Chen Jin has been granted the title of King of Pingyang, and Chen Xining has naturally become the Princess of Dayu. To put it bluntly, her title is only slightly lower than that of Su Buling, and she is considered a top-notch prince and noblewoman in Dayu. Nightingale naturally did not neglect Chen Xining. She helped lead the horse and raised her hand. "Miss Chen, please come. Sister Zhongli is on the boat. I will take you there." "Oh." Chen Xining nodded, arranged her hair a little, walked beside the three of them, and asked. "The weather is nice today. Is Mr. Su in the military camp or with Sister Zhongli and the others?" Zhu Manzi, who had always been familiar with himself, walked in front of Chen Xining and said with a smile. "If Miss Chen comes to see Mr. Su, I'm afraid she'll be late. Mr. Su left for business 2 days ago and will probably come back after the new year." When Chen Xining heard this, her footsteps stopped sharply. She traveled nearly 2,000 miles to find this place. Gone. That's not a waste of time. Zhu Manzi's mind was not as quick as usual. Seeing Chen Xining's reaction, he understood Chen Xining's true intention, but he did not point it out. He just said curiously. "Miss Chen, why don't you leave?" "Oh." Chen Xining came back to her senses and continued walking forward with a smile. "It's nothing, Ah Ching misses Mr. Su very much. If he is not here, I'm afraid Ah Ching will be a little disappointed." Ah Ching, who was leaning in his arms, shook his head blankly, obviously not understanding what his master meant. Ning Qingyi couldn't see the twists and turns in Chen Xining's heart, so she shook her head and said. "With Jeju here, Ah Ching shouldn't miss Su Buling too much. Let's go back to the ship first. Manzi keeps talking about the noodles you cooked, which just opened her eyes." "That's natural." Chen Xining was a little absent-minded, replied with a smile, and followed the three of them to the building. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 792. After leaving the building boat, Su Buling drove a carriage and took Zioan all the way north. There was light snow in the sky, and the carriage was not moving very fast. It would stop to look at the snow scenery from time to time. When encountering a more authentic old shop, it would get off and have a nice meal, and then start again after having enough rest. In the past, when Su Buletinling went out, he would always go out to do errands. He would hurry and take his time on the road and have no time to take into account the scenery on the road. But this time it was different. Although there was a purpose, the most important thing was to travel with Kui Zioan to relax. A quick trip without having to think about the intrigues between the various forces was actually very pleasant for Su Buring. The wind chimes on the pony carriage rang softly. Su Buring sat in front of the carriage, holding the straight knife in his hand, and continued to tell his self-written version of the legend of Abai. The car window was opened slightly, and Kui Zioan revealed her clean and clear eyes, scanning the snowy plains. Although the days on the high-rise boat are very leisurely, Kui Zioan still prefers this kind of environment where there are only you and me between the world and the world. I don't know if it is for this reason. Even the weakness of the body has been relieved a little. She sat up and leaned on the carriage. Feeling tired. The little sparrow was a little afraid of the cold, so it huddled in Kui Zioan's lapel and pecked Kui Zioan's chest with its beak from time to time. Then Kui Zioan looked away, grabbed a few pine nuts from the fruit plate nearby, peeled them open and fed them into the little sparrow's mouth, and joked. "I'm a patient, why do you always ask me to serve you?" The little sparrow is very spiritual. Although he was forced to travel, he was still very considerate when it was time to take care of the patients. He rubbed his furry head against Kui Zioan's clothes and said chirp, chirp, chirp twice, as if to say I don't have any hands, you can peel melon seeds for him, what's wrong with peeling two for me? Kui Zioan couldn't understand the bird's language, but she still liked this clingy little guy. After feeding her, she wrapped her and the little sparrow in quilts, and continued to lean on the carriage and listen to Su Buling's story. The carriage drove slowly for a while, without even leaving Yueyang's territory, and the sky gradually darkened. There is no position in this world. Su Buling knows not only the general direction, but also the details of the roads in various places. Walking along the official road, I saw that I didn't encounter any villages or towns for 2 or 3 miles, so I stopped by a small river. Kui Zioan leaned on the small couch, saw the carriage stopped, and turned to look at the river outside. "Sleep outside tonight?" "Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any villages or towns around. The scenery here is pretty good, so let's make do with it for one night." Su Buling jumped off the carriage, took off the shovel from the back of the carriage, dug an earthen stove on the ground, and prepared to set up a pot to make a fire for cooking. Kui Zioan looked at the deserted place and then at the small carriage. She blinked but didn't say anything. She lifted up the quilt and put on the fox fur. Kui Zioan is very weak. If she walks alone, she will feel dizzy after taking a few steps. It will probably take a long time to fully recover. She walked out of the carriage, wrapped in a thick red fox fur and a felt hat, with only one cheek exposed. The little sparrow didn't want to fly by itself and huddled in its furry collar. Su Buling was digging the earth stove. When he saw Kui Zioan getting up, he quickly put down the shovel. "Why are you out? It's cold outside. Go inside and lie down." Kui Zioan shook her head and sat down outside the carriage. "Just go about your business. I'm afraid it's suffocated, so I'll take it out for some air." While talking, Kui Zioan picked up the little sparrow huddled in her collar and threw it into the sky. "Bird." Yi turned several times in the air and quickly flapped her wings to stabilize her body. She wanted to get back into Kui Zioan's collar to keep warm. However, she was thrown up again. She was so angry that she hovered in the air, chirping, obviously saying, "If I don't hold it back, how can I breathe in the winter?" Su Buletinling secretly laughed in his heart. The little sparrow wouldn't be able to fly any longer if it gained weight. It would be good to exercise more. He didn't stop him at the moment and continued cooking in the pot. There were ingredients on the carriage, and Su Buling caught a big fish from the river. He killed and scaled the fish neatly, and then put it into a pot to make fish soup. In about half an hour, dinner was cooked. Su Buling took out the small case from the carriage and placed it outside the carriage. He took 2 wooden bowls with fish soup and placed them on the small case. Then he sat on the other side of the small case. Kui Zioan had been watching. She was too weak to help. She was a little embarrassed. She held up the small wooden bowl and said, "Thanks for your hard work. What's here, try how it tastes." Su Buring chuckled and picked up the wooden bowl. The light snow fell silently. The 2 people sat side by side in front of the carriage, with their legs dangling in the air, looking at the boundless snow field. The scene was not spectacular, but romantic enough. Receive red envelopes. Cash or point currency. Red envelopes have been sent to your account. Follow the public account Book Friends Base Camp on WeChat to get it. Kui Zioan looked at the fish soup in her hand and suddenly remembered the scene when she met Su Buling for the first time at this time last year. It was also winter, and the mountains were covered with snow outside. The 2 of them sat in the small kitchen and ate together with only 2 bowls of fish soup. They sat there all night long. Although the surrounding scene has changed, the bowl in his hand is still the same bowl that Su Buling carved with his own hands, and they are 2 people. Kui Zioan turned her head and looked at Su Buling, smiled, put the wooden bowl in front of her, took a sip, and then Kui Zioan's expression froze and her brows furrowed. Su Buling was drinking hot soup when he saw Kui Zioan's strange expression and said doubtfully, "What's wrong? It's too hot." "No." Kui Zioan swallowed the fish soup with difficulty, lowered her head and looked at it carefully, then whispered, "It's not hot, I like everything you cook. But as a man, a gentleman stays away from the kitchen, so it's natural that he is not good at cooking, and it's normal that the taste is average." After saying that, perhaps because she was afraid that Su Buling would be sad, Kui Zioan took another big sip from the wooden bowl. Tons, tons, tons. Su Buling's expression froze. His cooking skills could move Aunt Lu to tears, so it must not be good. But he was very serious just now, and it seemed that there was no big problem when he tasted it himself. "I didn't expect it to be so bad. Thousands of miles away in northern Qi, you can still find a restaurant in Daewoo. If you don't cook on the grassland, you can only eat dry food. What should you do then?" Su Buling looked down at the fish soup, a little embarrassed. "It's not far, why don't we go back now and take the nightingale with us?" Kui Zioan smiled and said, "It's okay, I'll teach you later, you can learn if you don't know." Su Buling thought about it and said no more, picked up the wooden bowl and ate heartily. After the meal, it was completely dark. Su Buling cleaned up the dishes and boiled a pot of hot water in an iron pot. After the 2 of them took turns to wash up, Kui Zioan returned to the carriage, leaned on the small couch, looked at the small carriage, and hesitated. Although the carriage was not small, there were many things placed inside, and there was only a small couch where 2 people could lie down, which was a bit crowded for 2 people to sleep. After taking a few glances, Kui Zioan said, "Hey, do you want to sleep with me?" Su Buling was feeding the horses outside. He staggered when he heard the noise and tilted his head to look at the carriage. "Well, I'll be on guard outside, you should go to bed early." Kui Zioan said, unbuttoned her dress, huddled in the quilt, put the little sparrow next to the pillow, covered the quilt, and said again, "If you feel cold, come in, just don't move around, I don't mind. It's better to pretend to be a gentleman outside than to go in and not move around." Su Buling shook his head secretly. After feeding the horses, he leaned outside the carriage, hugged the straight knife, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Go to sleep, there is still a long way to go." "Oh." Kui Zioan stared at the back of the car door. After confirming that Su Buling would not come in, she might be weak, tired, and gradually closed her eyes. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 793. Early in the morning, on the boat. The light has just turned white in the east. In the room at the stern of the ship, Xiao Xiang, who always goes to bed late and wakes up late, is still sleeping soundly in the warm bed. She holds a mahogany sign in her hand. Her eyelashes tremble slightly and her cheeks are slightly red. She doesn't know what she is doing. What a dream that shames others. The girls on the boat all know Xiang's work and rest time. Originally, no one would come to disturb her at this time, but something is obviously wrong today. Xiao Xiang's chest rose and fell slightly. She was breathing evenly, but slowly her eyebrows wrinkled. She held her breath for a moment, then pulled up the quilt to cover her face. Soon, there were some footsteps in the corridor outside the room, and a chirping voice came. Oh my God, who is cooking on the boat? What the hell? Could it be that someone poisoned you? Daodu, are you acting like a monster? Come up here. Miss, I didn't. Xiao Xiang opened her eyes drowsily and sniffed, but an indescribable smell came, causing her to wake up instantly. What the hell? Xiao Xiang turned over, covered her nose, put on her coat, and ran to the terrace to get some air. As soon as she opened the terrace door, a strong smell came out, which made her almost choke. She quickly closed the door again. He got up and said softly, Sister, do you want to murder your own sister? What the hell are you doing? The sound faded away. Directly below the terrace, in Lu Chuan's kitchen, water mist filled the air. Chen Xining stood in front of the stove, cooking noodles skillfully. Daodu and the maid stood outside with frightened eyes. Zhu Manzi's face turned pale, she hid behind Ning Qingyi, looked at the pot of dark food, and whispered. Xiaoning, are you sure this thing is edible? Sister Hongluan and Sister Kikai were so smoked that they ran off the boat, and Sister Xiang is probably about to do it too. Ning Qingyi had eaten it many times and was now used to it. She crossed her arms and nodded. Although it doesn't smell good, it tastes very good. You'll know it after eating it once. I won't eat it. This tastes just like that, how dare you eat it for the first time? I don't dare. If you don't let that guy hold the nightingale and eat it, I'm afraid he might do the same to me, so I just took a bite. This is what you want to taste. I'll just hold you and eat it later. Zhu Manzi's big eyes widened, knowing that Ning Qingyi would not tell lies, so he wanted to turn around and sneak away, but as soon as he took 2 steps, Qingyi slipped him back. Chen Xining has good cooking skills and is very serious about cooking. She recommends her hometown delicacies to others, so she naturally worked hard and spent the whole morning finally making the noodles. Food is ready. Chen Xining put the bowl on the tray and walked out of the kitchen with a smile. When she looked up, the boat was empty. Dozens of female relatives ran to the grass on the shore with strange eyes. Xiao Qi and Xiao Xiang gathered together and whispered, looking like they were planning to buy a new boat. Zhongli Jiju and Ning Yu had eaten together, and now they really explained to the girls seriously. Ning Qingyi and Chu Chu were still there. They took Manji's hands and dragged them to the front. Chu Chu said with a smile. Thank you for your hard work, Miss Chen. Master is really explaining it to them. You will know after eating it once. Chen Xining's reaction was not surprising at all. She had been like this before eating. She smiled softly, carried the tray to the dining room, and greeted. Girl Zhu, come here and try it. Zhu Manzi's expression was stiff. She wanted to try South Vietnamese food, but who knew it tasted so strong? A whole boatload of people were scared away. Now that the noodles have been cooked, due to etiquette, Zhu Manzi couldn't move his chopsticks, so he had to bite the bullet and sit opposite Chen Xining and said with a smile. Miss Chen, I can just eat it by myself. Well, you have been busy all morning, so please take a rest first. Chen Xining is not stupid. She has learned to handle cases since she was a child and has very clear logic. She knew that Man Zi would definitely turn her fans away when she left, so how could she leave? She sat in front of her and looked at Man Zi expectantly. I'm not tired. There are pickled sour bamboo shoots in the rice noodles. It's just like stinky tofu. It doesn't smell good but tastes great. It's only available in South Vietnam. Try it. Zhu Manzi knew that he was doomed, so he showed off his foodie spirit, picked up the rice noodles with chopsticks, and took a bite. A quarter of an hour later, in the kitchen, Zhu Manzi was wearing a small apron and cutting sour bamboo shoots on the chopping board. He looked very serious and asked softly, "Old Chen, Mr. Su really likes to eat this." Chen Xining stood with her hands behind her back, giving serious instructions behind her, nodded and said, "That's right, last time in Shiba village, he ate the noodles I made every day. There is an old saying, if you want to capture a man's heart, capture his stomach first. If Miss Zhu learns this, Mr. Su will definitely I love you very much." Zhu Manzi's face turned slightly red. "Oh, what are you talking about? Mr. Su and I, well, we are brothers of the opposite sex, different from Xiao Zhong and the others." Chen Xining smiled and nodded, not believing it at all. She has been on the ship for 2 days. Although she did not communicate in depth, she also saw the details of the ship. The female relatives on the ship were all Su Buling's women. Zhu Manzi already lived in Su Buling's harem. How could it be possible? It doesn't matter. Chen Xining came here this time to look for Su Buling's Tang Kaofeng. She couldn't just wait on the boat all the time. She had to find Su Buling's whereabouts, but she didn't know where Su Buling went. If she rashly inquired about Su Buling's whereabouts, it would be easy to be mistaken for thinking that she was deeply in love with Su Buling and wanted to give it to him for free. In order to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings, Chen Xining thought of asking around secretly in private. There are so many girls on the boat, and the 5 eldest sisters are obviously not easy to fool. King Yi, Shuchu, and Nightingale have all been in contact. If you ask, you will definitely doubt whether she likes Su Buling. Then the only ones left are Song Yafu and Zhu Manzi. Song Yafu stays with Xiao Qi every day. She seems to be a young lady from a scholarly family, and she should be very smart, so this girl with big breasts looks naive. After Chen Xining looked around, he naturally wanted to start with Manzi and ask about Su Buling's whereabouts. Now that she had the opportunity to be alone with Manzi, Chen Xining naturally started talking. "You and Mr. Su are brothers with different surnames." "No way. I heard King Yi say that you and Mr. Su have a very good relationship." Zhu Manzi's face turned red again. "Really? What did King Yi say about Mr. Su and me?" Chen Xining was just talking nonsense. King Yi was always reticent and rarely took the initiative to speak. How had she ever talked about this with her? She rolled her eyes and smiled. "Qing Ye said that Mr. Su always protects you, holding it in the palm of his hand for fear of falling, and holding it in his mouth for fear of melting." "So disgusting." Zhu Manzi frowned and said slightly dissatisfied. "She's talking nonsense. I'm not a helpless little girl. I'm also a gangster. In Chang'an City, if I hadn't helped him, Mr. Su would never have been able to leave the Dragon Pond and Tiger's Den, and bloodbathe Bama village and Chuangsha village. Do you know that it was me and Mr. Su who killed Zhang Xiang?" Chen Xining was slightly stunned. She knew that Zhu Manzi had a foundation in martial arts, but she had never seen Zhu Manzi take action, so she didn't know how high he was. Hearing this at this time, I was slightly surprised. Wish the girl to be so powerful. It's average. Zhu Manzi finally waited for his favorite part. He quickly put down the kitchen knife, washed his hands, took Chen Xining back to his room, and pointed to the portrait on the wall proudly. "Miss Chen, does she know who this is?" Chen Xining has practiced martial arts for many years. Although he has never seen this version of the portrait of the old sword master, it is impossible not to recognize the three characters Zhu Kexin in the lower left corner of the portrait. She nodded and said, "This is old sword master Zhu, Miss Zhu, huh? Miss Zhu's surname is also Zhu. Could it be that she is related to old sword master Zhu?" Zhu Manzi had caught a silly girl who was inexperienced in the world. He pretended to be a heroine in the world and said modestly, "Old sword master Zhu is my grandfather. My father, sword master Zhu Lu, is well known in the world. Miss Chen should have heard of him. A little famous. There is only one true swordsman in the world." Chen Xining's expression changed slightly. She knew that she could not see the truth, and she regarded the iron plate as a weakling. She quickly raised her hand and made a quaint salute. "The girl turns out to be the daughter of Zhu Jiansheng. I am ignorant of Mount Tai. I am disrespectful." Zhu Manzi suppressed her laughter and acted calmly. "Hello everyone, our official account will find red envelopes of gold and coins every day. You can get them as long as you follow them. The last benefit at the end of the year, please seize the opportunity. Public account book Friends Base Camp. We are all Jianghu people, Miss Chen doesn't have to worry about these secular etiquette." Chen Xining didn't expect that the girl in front of him was the hidden top boss on the ship, so she was a little nervous at this time. She turned her head and looked at the two swords on the sword stand. "The girl is also a swordsman? I seem to have never heard of the girl's name." Zhu Manzi shook his head, picked up the sword Zhanlu on the table, flicked the hilt skillfully, and drew out 3 points. "This sword is the heirloom of the Cao family in Junshan. However, like my father, I don't like to take advantage of weapons and use ordinary iron swords. My father said that young people should hide their edge and not reveal it too early. He is sharp, so he keeps a low profile when walking around in the world. It is normal for girls not to have heard of him." When Chen Xining saw this legendary sword, one of the top 10 famous swords, she became more and more convinced and her eyes were filled with respect. Chen Xining has the martial arts skills of a half-step master, coupled with his natural caution and endless defensive methods, he can challenge Tang Jiao in a one-on-one battle. He is considered a rare master in the Central Plains, but compared with the world's top sword master Zhu Lu, he is still inferior. A big chunk. Now that he met the daughter of sword master Zhu Lu, Chen Xining naturally did not dare to neglect. "It's because I'm ignorant. Miss Zhu's swordsmanship is very good, right?" Zhu Manzi knew her father's shaking the mountain, and her swordsmanship skills were among the best in the world, but her physical strength held her back. When asked about swordsmanship, she naturally nodded seriously. "It's passable, just a little worse than my father. I taught Mr. Su all his swordsmanship." Chen Xining staggered and looked at Manzi, a little disbelieving. Zhu Manzi also felt that he was boasting a bit too much, so he blinked and said, "No matter how good your swordsmanship is, it still depends on who is wielding the sword. I am still young, so my martial arts skills are definitely not as good as Mr. Su's." Chen Xining nodded and thought for a while, Miss Zhu is so powerful, she should be Mr. Su's right-hand man. Why doesn't Mr. Su take the girl with him when he goes out? When Zhu Manzi heard this heart-wrenching question, he couldn't be happy immediately, and felt a little disappointed in his heart. Since arriving on the building, Zhu Manzi has never left. Dunning, Xiaoning, Dezhong, Xiaozhong, and even Nightingale all took turns accompanying Su Buletinling to travel around the world, but she could only wait stupidly on the boat. It feels less interesting than traveling around the world with Ning Yuhe. It is said that he is afraid of getting into trouble because he is not good at martial arts, but Zhu Manzi is not bad in talent. He can tell by being able to sneak into the wolf guard of Tianzi camp alone. He has practiced martial arts a lot in the past 2 years, especially when he was alone on the ship. Wu was very serious and wanted to go out with Su Buling one day. Not to mention a one-on-one fight with Qing Ye, it would definitely be no problem to fight two Chuchis. But even so, it's still too far behind Su Buling. King Yi can only play soy sauce when he follows, and it's the same when she goes out. Zhu Manzi is naturally optimistic and never complains about these things, but how can he not feel a little grievance in his heart? Zhu Manzi slumped his shoulders, put the sword back, sat down on the chair, and swayed his calves. I can't help, so Mr. Su naturally won't take me with him, for fear of something happening. In fact, I have been a police officer since I was 14, and I ran to the capital alone. I have seen all kinds of storms, and I am much smarter than Chu Chu and Qing Ye. Something could go wrong, but I really can't help. Chen Xining looked a little confused, sat down in front of her, and asked. Why can't you help? Isn't Miss Zhu just a little worse than Mr. Su? It's just a little bit closer. Zhu Manzi supported his cheek with his hands and glanced at Chen Xining. I heard that you are about as powerful as Tang Qiao. Between the 6 of you and me, we should be able to tie with Mr. Su. Chen Xining was speechless. Zhu Manzi sighed softly and stood up. Forget it, let's learn to be a fan. Mr. Su will be back in the spring, and he should have learned how to do it by then. Chen Xining thought for a moment and suddenly said. Miss Zhu, do you want to go shopping in the rivers and lakes? If you want, I can accompany you. I have been staying in South Vietnam and often heard the legends of the rivers and lakes in the Central Plains, but I have never seen them lightly. I came out this time because I wanted to see them. See the world. Zhu Manzi paused. She definitely wanted to go out for a walk. She and Ning Yu traveled together in the rivers and lakes before. Although it was uneventful, it was the only rivers and lakes experience she had in her entire life. Only. Zhu Manzi hesitated for a moment, then turned around and said, It's okay to take you for a walk, but now that there's a war and it's not stable outside, what should I do if something goes wrong? Chen Xining smiled and patted her chest. We are just going for a walk, not to kill people. If nothing else, my ability to escape is unmatched in the world. Even Su Buling didn't catch me the first time. We are nearby Zhuanzhuan. As long as I am here, there will be no problem in keeping the girl safe. Chen Xining has half a master's level of martial arts, and can beat Tu Ning Yuhi together. She is almost invincible among women. She is a walking presence in the world of the Central Plains. Saying this is really not bragging. Zhu Manzi was a little moved, but he didn't want to cause trouble to the sisters on the ship. After thinking for a while, he still said. I'll go talk to Sister Kikai. If Sister Kikai agrees, I will take you out. Oh, okay. Zhu Manzi walked out of the room. Maybe he was really moved. He turned around and said. If Sister Kikai really agrees, you will follow me around the world and you will have to have a nickname so that you can be more imposing. I'll get you one. The snail noodles you make are particularly delicious, and you use a knife, so it's called snail knife. How about it? Very domineering, right? Snail knife. Chen Xining scratched his head, afraid that Manzi would regret it and could not refuse, so he reluctantly nodded. Okay, it's up to you. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 794. In the 12th lunar month of winter, there is snow flying thousands of miles outside the Great Wall. Kaiyufeng town was almost buried under the snow. Prostitutes, traders, gamblers and escorts all stood outside various stalls, looking at the southern skyline around the brazier, waiting for the arrival of the caravan. Although Kaiyufeng town is dilapidated, it only appeared in a few decades. After the Qi dynasty was destroyed before Jiazi, the Zhang family retreated 3,000 miles north with its remaining forces, and was driven to the boundless Mobei wasteland outside the pass. Although the Hintao plain serves as a granary, silk, tea and other goods are nowhere to be obtained. The shortage of materials means huge profits, and what follows is an almost rampant smuggling business at the border between the two countries. Kaiyufeng town is not far from the border. It was originally a meeting place for merchants from the two countries, with only a few consignee tents. As more and more merchants came and went, the town grew in size. At its peak, as many as 10,000 merchants gathered here in autumn. However, after Song Ji came to power, he wiped out the smuggling lifeline of Qingzhou and Yuzhou with one stroke, and Kaiyufeng town also declined. It was not until recently that the war between the two countries resumed, and the control power of the Yu government weakened, that Kaiyufeng town slowly recovered vitality. Unlike other land ports, Kaiyufeng town only has a shady smuggling business, and the only people who come here are those who are wandering the world. The northern Qi government did not want this line to disappear and turned a blind eye to the existence of Kaiyufeng town. This also made Kaiyufeng town a purely lawless place. Desperate gangsters also like to hide here. However, where there are people, there are rivers and lakes. When there are more people in the rivers and lakes, rules will naturally follow. In order not to scare away the merchants who bring money, the town has an unwritten rule: no killing is allowed in the town. I don't know who made the rules, but almost everyone abides by them, because if the rules are broken, this rare safe haven for people in the world will be gone, and no one will ruin their jobs. There were few merchants on the road in the snowy day, and all the people in the town were looking forward to it. It was not until noon that the sound of horse bells rang at the southern street entrance. Jingle bell, jingle bell. The ringing of the horse bell was very clear. Although it was far away, the people on the long street still turned their heads and cast their eyes over it, like hungry wolves smelling the smell of blood. The ringing of horse bells gradually approached, and the tall horse appeared at the end of the long street pulling the carriage. The carriage was not big, and there was no cargo behind it. There were no guards around to escort the carriage, only a coachman sitting outside. The coachman, like all northern Qi men, had long hair shawl, was wrapped in a thick sheepskin jacket, and even his face was covered tightly. He was holding the reins and had a single sword at his side. The single sword is very clean, and the bamboo green scabbard is also very beautiful, just like the decoration on the body of a wealthy family in the Central Plains. However, the knife is obviously not used for decoration. Hello everyone, our official account will find red envelopes of gold and coins every day. You can get them as long as you follow them. The last benefit at the end of the year, please seize the opportunity. Public account book Friends Base Camp. Clean means rarely seeing blood, beautiful means flashy. When such a knife appeared in the wild land outside the Great Wall, it was like a fair-skinned and beautiful fragile lady rashly walking into a hungry bandit's village. From the restaurant at the front of the street, a simple-looking waiter walked out, put on a warm smile, and raised his hand to say hello. Sir, do you want to be a top-notch person or stay in a hotel? The young coachman on the carriage must have been to Kaiyufeng town for the first time. He didn't know how many bones were buried in the ground outside Xianghe town. Facing the inquiry, the young coachman waved his hand politely. Passing by, not staying at the hotel. Where is your guest going? This place is not peaceful. There are horse bandits everywhere outside. It's not safe to walk alone. How about introducing 2 bodyguards to your guest? With our boss's sign here, I guarantee that you will have a smooth journey. Risk? No need, just go out for a walk, I have my own sense of discretion. Hee hee. After a brief conversation, the carriage headed to the other end of the long street. The various stalls in the back did not come forward to say hello. Every year, a few young children who don't know the heights of the world will come to this Mobei wilderness where they eat people without spitting out their bones. Without exception, they are surrounded by swords and horses, and their words are arrogant. There is no way to stop someone who is looking for death, and there is no need to persuade him, because if he doesn't spend money to hire 2 guards now, when he leaves the town, the money he has will eventually return to the town. The carriage gradually moved away, and the waiter who greeted him shook his head and sighed, then turned back to the wine shop. In the wine shop, several men with gangster spirit put down their wine bowls, picked up their swords from their sides, and walked towards the back of the wine shop. While walking, I also complained to several colleagues at the table next to me. What a damn unlucky guy. It's our brother's turn this time. Seeing as that kid seems to know some martial arts, he probably has to put in some effort. It would be nice to hire some escorts from my brothers. It will cost less money to save your life. In Kaiyufen town, wherever there are serious escorts, if they are given money, they will be escorts to see them off, and if they are not given, they will be escorts to see them off, and they will accompany them when they leave. On the small carriage, Su Buling walked through the street holding a riding crop, as if he didn't hear the conversation in the distance. I just looked at this small town on the border outside the Great Wall with great interest. Kui Zioan stayed in the carriage. It was too cold. She was wrapped in 2 quilts and her body was as thin as a willow. She could hardly see anyone. After nearly a month of traveling, Kui Zioan was still a little weak physically, but she had completely recovered mentally and was back to the carefree and unrestrained girl in Peach Blossom Valley. Walking through the town at this time, Kui Zioan sat up from the carriage, looked outside through the gap in the window, and asked, Su Buletanling, where have we been? Don't you want to stay here for one night? Su Buling took out the map and made an estimate based on the distance. We just arrived in Kaiyufen town. This place is not safe. We should stay outside at night. In a few days, we should be able to reach Hulahai. Hulahai is an inland lake in Mobei. It is considered one of the most beautiful places outside the Great Wall. Su Buring's main purpose is to visit the mountains and rivers. The first stop when he arrived in northern Qi was naturally where to go. Kui Zioan said softly and didn't say much. She just looked at the street scene that was completely different from that in Zhongyuan. The little sparrow has been completely frozen and has not left the carriage for several days. She has been huddled in Kui Zioan's arms from morning to night. After dinner, she opened her mouth and gained weight. Just when she wanted to get into Kui Zioan's arms and continue sleeping, the door of the carriage opened, then it was opened a little, and Su Buling's voice came in. Yi, come out to work. Gigi. The little sparrow looked at the snowy sky outside, shook his head listlessly, and flew to Su Buring's shoulder. Su Buling raised his hand and touched the little sparrow's head. I've gained so much weight. If I don't fly around a few times for exercise, I won't be able to fly anymore. If I go back, I'll be scolded to death by Juju. Go ahead. The little sparrow couldn't speak and couldn't refuse. After adapting to the wind and snow, it fluttered its wings and flew high into the sky like a sharp arrow. Su Buring raised his eyes and continued to drive the carriage towards the end of the street. On the way, we passed a small tea shop. There was an old woman sitting in the tea shop, sitting by the stove and warming herself. As the carriage passed by, she said calmly, Hunter, the snow is so heavy, it's not safe to go out. Let's rest for the night before leaving. Su Buring turned his head and glanced. The tea shop was not big. There was a small table at the door with a layer of snow piled on it. The gossip pattern could be vaguely seen on the hanging tablecloth. It seemed to be a fortune teller's table, and there were also holding a bamboo stick. There was only an old woman in the tea shop. She was very old and had a kind face. She felt completely different from the other people in the town. Kui Zioan looked through the gap in the car window and said softly, This old woman is a good person, and she is advising you. Su Buling knew that Kui Zioan's mind was as bright as a mirror and could see through the surface and see people's inner being. When he heard Zioan say this, he looked at the old woman and said kindly, "Thank you for your concern, Auntie. I have my own sense of discretion." The old woman shook her head and smiled, and said nothing more. It seemed that this was not the first time she had tried to persuade such a stupid young man like him, and she knew she couldn't persuade him. Drive. Su Buletinling gave a light drink and disappeared into the streets of Kaiyufeng town without stopping. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 795. After leaving Kaiyufeng town, there is an endless snowfield ahead. There are no landmarks in the wilderness. The only things that can be used to identify the road are the corpses on the snow. There are people, horses, and wolves. Some of them have freshly frozen blood, and some are half buried under the snow, with only a few bones showing. On both sides of the road, wolves were wandering in groups, howling low in the wind and snow, staring at the slow-moving pony carriage with bloodthirsty eyes. From time to time, wild wolves came nearby to test, and after seeing the weapons on the carriage, they quietly retreated. Follow patiently and wait for the opportunity. Perhaps even the wolf knew that such a lonely little carriage would not survive long in the wilderness. Su Buling drove the carriage an unknown distance north. It wasn't until the wind and snow stopped and the stars lit up that he stopped on the endless snow field. The cold winter in Mobei is only white, and not a single tree or mountain can be seen. All that can be seen is the boundless sky and earth, and the vast silence. Su Buring jumped off the carriage, took out the iron pot and dry firewood from the back, dug a small hole in the frozen soil, and melted the snow to heat hot water. Kui Zioan was wrapped in a fox fur and sat outside the carriage. She raised her eyes and looked at the starry sky within reach. The stars were reflected in her eyes, making it difficult to tell whether the starry sky was more beautiful or the person looking up at the starry sky was more beautiful. After looking at it for a moment, Kui Zioan turned her gaze back and said doubtfully, "Why haven't the robbers come yet? Are they lost?" The two of them ran from Daio to northern Qi, and there was a chaotic fighting area. It was impossible not to encounter some unsighted bandits on the way. Naturally, the result was that Su Buletinling's sword was lifted up, and the world was saved from a few disasters. Kui Zioan has a somewhat special personality. She regards life and death as the blooming and declining of trees and flowers. She likes to let nature take its course and dislikes fighting and killing between people. However, Kui Zioan is also sensible and will not avoid fighting and killing when it cannot be avoided. And also liked watching Su Buling get rid of those evil people who caused harm to others, just like pulling out weeds in a flower bed. Su Buling whistled softly, and the little sparrow that had been flying all the way fell from the sky. With the slightest noise in the wind, he chirped to alert the horse bandits to their location, and then got into the carriage. Su Buling stood up, picked up the shovel from his side, started digging a hole in the snow, and said with a smile, "You go first into the carriage and hide. The beating and killing are too bloody. It's not good for my daughter's family to see." Kui Zioan held the carriage with her hands, gently swayed her skirt, shook her head and said, "Just be gentle and you'll be fine soon. Finish it in 2 or 3 times, then dig a hole and bury it. Then we can eat and sleep early. We have to leave early tomorrow. Are you going to inquire about the Dongyu envoy? Well, don't delay your business by just traveling with me." "I know." Within 2 words, the sound of horse hooves could be heard from the snowfield behind. 6 fast horses surrounded them from behind. The man on the horse was holding a simple knife and wrapped in a large animal skin coat. He exuded a strong aura. He could take over the job in Kaiyufeng town, so he obviously had some skills. At this time, the horse bandits all covered their faces with black scarves. They shouted and shouted along the way and sprinted to the carriage at full speed. They circled around the carriage and glanced at the strange men and women on and off the carriage. The boss of the horse bandits wielded 2 swords and was quite burly. When he saw Kui Zioan wrapped in a fox fur on the carriage, he was slightly stunned. After looking at it twice, he focused on the red fox for worth thousands of gold. Go up and say. You're still a fat sheep. Boy, you're not going to have to drink the wine as a penalty. If you spend some money in town to hire a few of our brothers, according to the rules of the world, you won't touch the employer even a penny. Now that you're in the wilderness, but there's no chance. Su Buling used a shovel to dig a big hole for 6 people to lie down, as if he had never heard of it. Kui Zioan came here and had experienced it many times. At this time, she looked at the boss of the horse bandits and pointed to the hole in the ground. Hey, wait until he digs the hole before you start. It will be easier to bury it later. The 6 horse bandits circling around were confused. The leader of the horse bandits frowned and muttered, "It turns out he is a fool. It's a pity that he can't buy it at a good price." Perhaps because he thought there was something wrong with these 2 people, the bandit boss turned his attention to Su Buling again. "Boy, there's no need for you to dig a hole yourself. I really want to be buried in the ground. Call me Grandpa, and I will bury you. Remember to be smarter in the next life." Su Buletinling dug a hole seriously and ignored him. After all, there was no need to waste time with the dead. Hey! The 6 horse bandits were also annoyed. After wandering in the wilderness for so long, this was the first time they had seen such short-sighted people. The weather was too cold, and the bandit boss was in a hurry to go to town. He had no time to wait for Su Buling to slowly dig a hole. He immediately raised his knife and struck Su Buling in the back. Although there was strength in numbers, the leader of the bandits was also an old man. To prevent his ship from capsizing in the ditch, his moves were very conservative, leaving a lot of room for retreat to prevent him from kicking the iron plate and being counterattacked. Su Buling gripped the shovel tightly, preparing to slap the head of the horse bandit behind him into a rotten watermelon with his backhand. But before Su Buling took action, the sound of breaking wind suddenly came from the distance, and from the corner of his eye, he saw a knife whirling out of the night. The blade is long and slender, the handle is dark, and it is as fast as a meteor, almost at the same time as the sound of breaking wind. Su Buling narrowed his eyes slightly, looked a little more serious, and stopped waving the shovel. The reaction of the 6 horse bandits was much slower. After hearing the sound of breaking wind, the leader of the horse bandits changed his face slightly. Before he could duck to avoid it, the sharp blade swiped past the right hand holding the knife. Cha! The knife sliced through the arm without any obstruction. Blood splattered in the night, and a thick arm fell to the snow. Before the leader of the horse bandits could scream, the scimitar had already flown over the side of the carriage and chopped off the chest of a horse bandit behind him. The huge force directly chopped the unprepared horse bandit off his horse. Ah! The shrill scream sounded in the night wind, and the half of the horse bandit leader's right arm was bleeding like a spring. He turned around and wanted to run away on his horse. The bloody scene made Kui Zioan, who had a mysophobia, shrink her neck, and quickly fell back and flipped into the carriage, not forgetting to close the door. Who? The 5 horse bandits were in a mess. Just by this knife, they knew that they had encountered a certain hero in the northern frontier. The horse bandit leader even recognized the flying knife. Not long ago, he had seen it in Kaiyufeng town, hanging on the waist of a young swordsman. Run! The horse bandit leader was also a man. He endured the pain of a broken arm and ran towards Kaiyufeng town with his horse's belly. It's just that within a short distance, the best horse in the world can't match the instantaneous explosive power of a warrior who has reached the peak. In the direction where the knife flew, a figure wearing a bamboo hat appeared. His body was like a falcon wandering on the snowy plain, swift and light, leaving no trace on the snow, and making no sound, but in the blink of an eye, he was near the carriage. Su Buling's eyes showed some admiration. Apart from anything else, this body movement is definitely at the level of a master. If it was an assassin, he would probably be scared by a sneak attack. The young swordsman obviously not only has outstanding body movement, but also outstanding killing methods. The biggest difference between the warriors of northern Qi and the warriors of the Central Plains is the smell of blood on their bodies. The warriors of the Central Plains value rules and seniority, and they also pay attention to stopping at the right time when competing and sparring. They generally don't show their killing moves unless they have to. Under the absolute dominance of the government, there are not so many people who can be killed indiscriminately. The warriors of northern Qi were different. They were driven out of the Central Plains 60 years ago and faced endless banditry in the wild land. The young generation of warriors grew up through killing, just like raising a gu, using the blood of others to raise the sword in their hearts. This method is inhumane, but it is obviously in line with martial arts, because martial arts are killing skills. Only by fighting for life and death in desperate situations can you improve with half the effort. If you rely on just enough competition, you will never reach the peak in your life. There are very few top warriors in northern Qi, but the warriors who can kill from the wild land of Mobai are all top killing gods without exception. And the young swordsman in front of him obviously came from this path. In the night, the young swordsman wandered to the front, without a word of nonsense or extra movements, hooked the saber on the broken arm with his toes, held the blade upside down and pulled it diagonally, and the head of the horse bandit leader flew into the air. The remaining 4 horse bandits fled in fear, but before they could run a few steps, the young swordsman stepped over the heads of 4 horses like a dragonfly skimming the water and landed on the snowfield in front. There was a red line on the necks of the 4 horse bandits, their eyes were wide open like copper bells, and almost at the same time, they fell off the horses that were still running. Dong dong dong. After a few soft sounds, the horse hooves went away, and the snowfield became quiet. The young swordsman stuck his saber into the ground, turned around and picked up his bamboo hat, slowly drew and put away his sword, revealing a slightly feminine chin. "This is not the place you should come." His tone was calm, but also a bit lonely. "No money to read novels? Give you cash or points, limited to 1 day to receive. Follow the public account book Friends Base Camp and get it for free." Su Buling raised his eyebrows. He has always been the one who drew his sword to help when he saw injustice on the road. This is the first time that someone has been showing off in front of him. But no matter what, it is a fact that the young swordsman helped in times of crisis. If Su Buling was an ordinary civilian who was powerless, he would owe the young swordsman 2 lives today. The word knight is not about the level of martial arts, but about the spirit. If you have chivalry in your heart, even if you are just a weak scholar, you dare to stand up when the weak are in danger, then you deserve the word knight, and you are no worse than the martial arts masters in the world. Su Buling did not have the idea of showing off his martial arts to attack the opponent. He showed the admiration he should have. He stuck the iron shovel into the ground and raised his hand to perform a Jianghu salute. "Thank you for your help, young knight. I am Su Shan. May I ask your name?" The young swordsman should have left, but he did not understand why the person in front of him was digging a pit when he was ambushed. If he dug it for himself, then the person in front of him should be a very interesting person, and it is worth discussing his thoughts at that time. If he dug it for the 6 horse bandits, then the person in front of him would be even more interesting. Just like the innocent little girl who was fortune-telling in the wolf den in Kaiyufeng town, the person who looked harmless in a dangerous environment but was still alive must be the most dangerous person. The young swordsman covered the handle of the sword with a straw raincoat, walked up to Su Buling, and smiled. "My name is Lu Wei. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce." Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 796. The tree has no roots, the willow has no leaves. No one calls this name, it's too desolate. Su Buling knew that this was a pseudonym, but this name suited this eccentric young swordsman very well. Lu Wei looked like a populous Euphratica growing in thousands of miles of yellow sand. She was left alone with no relatives or friends, and she also showed a stubbornness that would last for thousands of years. She was obviously full of desolation, but she still had a smile on her face. Kui Zioan opened the car window a little, glanced at the two people standing by the bonfire, and said, "Hey, are you having any trouble?" Lu Wei kept his eyes on Su Buling and did not turn around when he heard the voice, because he had already seen that the woman in the car did not know martial arts and was not worthy of attention. Su Buling turned his head and said with a smile, "This is my wife," making Brother Lu laugh. Lu Wei did not answer, but looked at Su Buling's hand and the straight knife inserted on the side. "You also use a knife?" Su Buling looked at his drunken bamboo sword and nodded. "Know a little. How many will it be?" Lu Wei lifted up his raincoat slightly and placed his right hand on the black ink handle, ready to go. It seems that he is still a martial arts fanatic. Su Buling found Lu Wu pleasing to his eye, and he didn't want to destroy a martial arts fanatic's desire to pursue martial arts, so he spread his hands. "It's enough to kill a few horse bandits, but I'm afraid it's not enough to deal with Brother Lu." Lu Wei lost interest when he saw that Su Buling refused to fight. Without saying a word, he turned around and walked towards Kaiyufeng town. The most interesting thing about Jianghu is not the fighting and killing, but the various people and things. Su Buring finally met a charming stranger, and he didn't want to forget about each other in the world, so he tried to persuade him to stay. "Brother Lu, do you drink?" Lu Wei paused for a moment and turned around. "What wine?" "Broken jade burning, you can't buy it in Mobei. No one in the world can resist Duaniashu, which burns the heart, lungs, and throat. Those who have never had it want to take a sip, and those who have had it can't quit." Lu Wei hesitated for a moment, turned around, and walked to the bonfire again. "I'll save you once, I'll share a bowl of wine with you." Su Buling raised the corner of his mouth and smiled, turned around and took out the tea-green wine gourd from the car that he was usually reluctant to drink, and brought 2 more wine bowls. Lu Wei sat on the ground next to the bonfire with hot water, put a single sword on his lap, and took off his bamboo hat. The face under the bamboo hat is very delicate. She looks to be less than 20 years old, with a bit of femininity. Like all northern Chi men, her hair is long and shawl. If she doesn't definitely have an Adam's apple, it is normal for a woman to be mistaken for a masculine one. Su Buling placed the wine bowl on the snow, poured the clear wine from the gourd, dropped it into the wine bowl, and started talking. "Brother Lu, where are you from?" He is very skilled in martial arts despite his age. Lu Wei was silent for a moment, but said calmly, "At the foot of Tianshan Mountain, it's far away from here. You may not have heard of it." Su Buletinling was slightly surprised. Tianshan is quite far from here, but it is quite close to Su Buling's home, just outside the sandbank. Kingsu is to the south of Tianshan, and northern Qi is to the north of Tianshan. As the eldest son of Prince Su, Su Buling naturally faces off against Prince Yu all the year round. The area near Tianshan Mountain is already considered a very remote area, with a sparse population and only a handful of large families. Lu is not a popular surname. Su Buling only remembered that there was an imperial Shang family with the surname Lu who took root there and traveled to the western regions. The business in northern Qi can be regarded as one of the more prominent families in northern Qi. Judging from Lu Wei's face, he was obviously from the Central Plains, and his ancestors must have migrated north from the Central Plains. Moreover, he is poor in literature and rich in martial arts. He has outstanding martial arts at a young age and has not yet turned into a dark-skinned rough man. He has no money to accumulate. Thinking of this, Su Buling smiled, "I have traveled all over the world, and I have actually been near Hiken. I heard that there is a big merchant named Lu there." The owner of the family is Lu Shanpuo, the imperial merchant of Daqi. Could it be brother Lu? Is it related to the Lu family? Lu Wei frowned slightly, obviously not expecting Su Buring to be so knowledgeable. He was silent for a moment and shook his head slightly. It's okay, drink. He. Seeing this, Su Buling didn't ask any more questions. He picked up the wine bowl and touched it with Lu Wei. The strong drink entered his throat, seeming to tear his lungs apart. Lu Wei was just like the kumis on the grassland. He took a big sip very boldly. The result was like all those who drank Duan Yashao for the first time. His face instantly turned red from suppressing it, and the sweat on his forehead started to fall. He gritted his teeth and endured it for a moment before regaining his breath. What a strong drink, it lives up to its reputation. Su Buletinling had a smile on his face. He had seen many scenes like this in Sun's shop in the past, but now that he saw it again, he still found it very interesting. No matter they are top masters or ants in the world, they are all equal in front of Duan Yashao, and they will definitely say well deserved after drinking. Kui Zioan leaned in the carriage and watched the two grown men drinking. She felt a little greedy and licked her lips. Lao Su, I also want to drink. Lao Su? Do you want a wife or not? Su Buletinling's eyes looked strange, but he felt relieved after thinking that he had just introduced Kui Zioan as his wife. He stood up, took out Xiao Muwen, poured half a bowl, and handed it to Kui Zioan in the car window. Drink slowly, this is much stronger than your peach blossom wine. I drank it. Kui Zioan held the small bowl in both hands, took a sip, and then looked at the little sparrow standing on her shoulder. Would you like some? The little sparrow shook its head. It had just flown for a long time and didn't even bother to scream. Lu Wei sat in front of the bonfire, watching the scene of the couple loving each other. For some reason, his eyes dimmed slightly, and he turned his head to look at the flames, silently. Su Buling returned to sit down by the campfire, thought for a while, and asked. Why is brother Lu here? Lu Wei glanced at the corpse on the ground. I was passing by just now, and when I saw these people going out together, I knew I was targeting someone, so I stopped by to take a look. As he spoke, Lu Wei looked at Chai Feng Ma, who was pulling the cart. In order to keep out the cold and cover its tracks, the Feng Chai horse was also wrapped in a layer of cloth. Its gray head and face were not eye-catching, but if you sit up close and take a closer look, you can still see that the Feng Chai horse's body is too large, and it is rare to see it in mobile. Horses and weapons are one of the important factors that distinguish people in Jianghu. Clothes and shoes can be tattered, but no one dares to use them as tools for escaping or killing people. Generally speaking, the better the horse, the higher the status or martial arts, otherwise it is just giving mounts to others. After Lu Wei looked carefully for a few times, he narrowed his eyes slightly. The horse is good. What does brother Su do? He doesn't look like an ordinary person. Su Buring smiled. I was originally a wandering knight, doing some small business as escorts. In autumn, my wife contracted the cold and became ill. Ordinary doctors can't cure it. I heard a few days ago that there was someone in the capital. A piece of 1,000-year-old agar wood can cure all diseases, so I thought of taking her to Guiyan City to see it. Lu Wei turned to look at Kui Zioan, who was drinking a sip. He could indeed see the emptiness of his physique. He frowned. There is a 1,000-year-old agar wood paperweight in Guiyan City, but if it is placed in the royal study room of the palace, your trip will be in vain. Lu Wei is obviously not an ordinary ranger. He has such martial arts at a young age. Even if he has no family background, he is still a guest that is competed for by various factions. He is not ordinary even if he thinks he is ordinary. When Su Buring heard this, he knew that Lu Wei was related to the Northern Qi court, and maybe he was from the government. He blinked and said with a smile. Really? This is troublesome. But your life is at stake, so you have to go and try. As long as the Imperial Master is not here, there is no chance. Lu Wei shook his head gently, as if he were looking at a foolish young man who didn't know the heights of the world. The Imperial Advisor has been returning to Yanchinj recently. If you go there, you will die. Furthermore, even if the Imperial Advisor is not here, Daqi's capital is not much worse than Dao's Chang'an city. If you can just walk to the monarch's frame casually, the two countries will. Why do we need to fight each other? Su Buling was a little confused. Didn't the Imperial Master fight with Dao in the pass? Why did he return to the capital? Lu Wei took a sip of wine, shook his head and said, "The Imperial Master is such a powerful person, how could I know the reason?" However, a few days later, for the crowning ceremony of Prince Zhongdu, princes from all over the world will go to the capital to congratulate me. I heard that there are people coming from Dao. I guess it has something to do with it. Prince Zhongdu is the eldest son of Northern Qi monarch Zhonglin. According to the Zhang family's clan laws, the eldest son and his queen will be named princes and gradually come into contact with military and political affairs, which is considered a very important matter. Su Buling paid attention to Lu Wei's words and found that when he mentioned Zhongdu's name, he instinctively sounded a bit close to her. It was not like he was talking about a stranger, and he should have some relationship with Zhongdu. Su Buling thought about it secretly and continued to ask. Dao and Daqi are fighting fiercely. How could they send someone here to congratulate them? Could it be that Dao is afraid of being beaten and has come to ask for peace? Lu Wei shook his head. How can I, a Jianghu man, know about the affairs of the imperial court? Seeing this, Su Buling stopped asking any more questions. He was not sure whether the envoys of the four eastern kings had arrived in northern Qi. According to the time, they should not have arrived yet. If you want to know this, I am afraid you have to go to Liang near Hulahai. Cheng Cheng inquired about where Prince Yu of the northern Qi dynasty was based. After a bowl of wine, both of us were sweating. Su Buling picked up the wine gourd and wanted to pour another bowl for Lu Wei. Lu Wei raised his hand to block the wine bowl. You can't buy this wine in Mobei. Just give it a try to avoid getting addicted and worrying about it for the rest of your life. Kui Zioan had been sitting in the carriage watching. After hearing this, she said crisply, I was quite good at Taoism in my middle age, and in my later years I came home to the southern border of the mountains. I went alone every time I was in a good mood, knowing that I would succeed in vain. When I walked to a water-poor place, I would sit and watch the clouds rise. Occasionally, I would visit Lin Su, and we would talk and laugh without return. What Jianghu people want is to be carefree and casual. With a knife in their hand, they can't go anywhere in the world. How can they worry about a bowl of wine all their lives? These words are Kui Zioan's heartfelt words. Although she is not a Jianghu person, she has always been like this. But how many people in the world can be as carefree and happy as Kui Zioan? Even Su Buletinling couldn't do it. Lu Wei was obviously worried about something, so he couldn't just walk to the waterless place and sit and watch the clouds rise without restraint. Lu Wei was silent for a moment. After all, he did not accept any more wine from Su Buling. He stood up, inserted the knife into his waist, pulled his hat, and walked towards the wilderness. See you again if we are destined. Walk slowly. Su Buling stood up, watched Lu Wei's back disappear into the night, shook his head and sighed softly. Still writing. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 797. The sky in Mobei is very clean, and the bright moon and stars seem to hang overhead. After Lu Wei left, Su Buling picked up the shovel and continued digging holes, burying the 6 horse bandits who died suddenly in the wilderness into the frozen soil. This kind of desperado who robs the weak and then turns it into fertilizer to raise a field of weeds after death may be his only contribution to this world. After cleaning up the messy battlefield, the hot water in the iron pot was boiled. Su Buling got a wooden basin, filled it with hot water and went to the carriage. But as soon as he opened the door of the carriage, he was stunned by what he saw. The warm carriage was filled with the faint smell of alcohol. The little sparrow walked back and forth on the small table, looking at the small couch where he slept with despair. On the soft couch by the window, the thick quilt was lifted slightly. Kui Zioan was lying on her side, holding her cheek with her left hand and humming a tune softly. Ah-ha-ha-ha. The broken jade burn was so strong that ordinary women couldn't bear it. Kui Zioan drank half a bowl of strong wine. At this time, she was obviously a little tipsy. She unbuttoned one of the buttons on her collar, revealing her neck as white as nephrite. Lying on his side on the soft bed, his delicate cheeks were flushed, and there were some beads of sweat hanging on his forehead. Seeing Su Buletinling come in, Kui Zioan stopped humming, turned her green and white jade fingers around a strand of hair hanging from her temples. Her eyes were slightly drunk and blurry. "Old Su, I drank too much." Su Buling was holding the basin with a little helplessness in his eyes. "Do you feel uncomfortable having to drink even though you can't drink? Come on, take a shower and go to bed early." Su Buling placed the wooden basin on the small table, sat next to the soft couch, and raised his hand to help Kui Zioan up. It's just that Kui Zioan was confused. She leaned on the pillow and refused to get up. She just raised her cheek. "You help me wash it, I don't want to move." Su Buling was a little amused when he saw this, but did not refuse. He picked up a towel and put it in the hot water. After wringing it out, he held the back of Kui Zioan's head and began to wipe his face. Kui Zioan waited with her eyes closed. She thought that Su Buling would wipe her cheeks very gently like her mother did, but she didn't expect that the hot towel was directly placed on her face, and she rubbed it with a palm that was bigger than her little face. Just like when her mother washed her face when she was a child. Whoa! Kui Zioan's cheeks hurt from being rubbed. She quickly squirmed to dodge and grabbed Su Buling's wrist. "Your hands are so heavy." Su Buling had no intention of stopping and continued rubbing his pitiful little face. "Wash your face, just wash your face. It's just like taking a bath. Only with heavy hands can you rub it clean. You'll be fine in no time." Twitter. The little sparrow liked the scene so much that it flew onto Su Buling's shoulder and chirped twice. It should have been saying, "Things that are light and airy are called flirting, so you have to rub them like this." Kui Zioan closed her eyes tightly and tried to resist. "I'd better do it myself." "No, be honest." Kui Zioan struggled for a few times, but when she saw that she couldn't hide, she stopped hiding. She lay on Su Buling's arm and was still being ravaged by him. Su Buling rubbed his face carefully and then started rubbing his neck. The hot towel slid down his neck to near the collarbone. The collar that had been unbuttoned was opened further, revealing the corners of the blue belly band. The carriage was lit with candles, and under the dim light, her skin, which was a bit drunk, was extremely moist, and it was white and rosy. Even though Su Buling knew that nothing was wrong, the movements of his hands were still a little gentle subconsciously. Point. Kui Zioan kept staring at Su Buling's face, feeling some changes in him, and snorted softly. "Lao Su, do you look good?" Su Buletinling blushed and closed his collar. "Why do you still call me Lao Su when everyone is gone? I'm several years younger than you, so I call you aunt." Kui Zioan blinked. "I feel that you are older than me, so it is appropriate to call me Lao Su. If you are not happy, then call me Xiao Su." "Xiao Su, is your aunt good looking?" "Nice." Su Buling coughed lightly. He didn't have much idea at first, but when he heard the rebellious name, his thoughts went a little sideways. He chuckled, put away the towel, washed his face, then filled a wooden bucket with hot water, put the medicine prepared by Jeju, and soaked Kui Zioan's feet to condition his body. Kui Zioan sat up from the soft couch. Seeing that Su Buling was about to help her take off her socks, she quickly shook her head to stop it and pulled off the white socks herself. Kui Zioan's figure is very slender, but she doesn't look thin. Her bones and muscles are well proportioned. Her ankles are connected to the instep with perfect lines. Her white and crystal clear skin is as if carved from mutton fat nephrite. When she dips into the hot water, she arches slightly. The toes shrank. Su Buling sat nearby and looked at it, thought for a while, and put his hand on Kui Zioan's knee. Kui Zioan originally lowered her head, but was slightly startled when she saw this, and then looked at Su Buling. "What are you doing?" "Taking advantage of Auntie." Before he finished speaking, Su Buletanling pressed down. "Wow! Ah, it's so hot, so hot." Kui Zioan shivered, her feet were stuck in the bucket and couldn't get back, and she slapped Su Buling on the shoulder angrily. "Why are you like this? Let me go." Su Buletanling tested the temperature of the water and found it was just right for soaking his feet. Naturally, he didn't let go and said seriously, "It's good to warm it up. After soaking it, you can sleep comfortably, and then take a walk around during the day, and your body will naturally feel better." The foot bath was only for a moment, and once you got used to it, you just felt comfortable. The heat surged up to your lungs, and your whole body warmed up. Kui Zioan drank some wine, soaked for a while, and then felt a little hot. She pulled her collar a little and moved the barrel closer to Su Buling with her feet. "Do you want to soak your feet together?" It was too much trouble to boil water. Although Su Buling was not very cold, soaking his feet to relieve the fatigue of traveling was not a problem. He did not refuse at the moment. He took off his boots and put his big feet into the wooden barrel. The wooden barrel was not big, and it was obviously a bit crowded to put 4 feet in it. It was impossible for the well water to not interfere with the river water. When their skin touched each other, Su Buling was obviously very calm, but his heart trembled slightly involuntarily. On the contrary, Kui Zioan was not shy, or she had never had such feelings in her heart since she was a child, only likes and dislikes. Kui Zioan looked down at the wooden barrel, and maybe she felt a little crowded, so she raised her toes and stepped on the instep of Su Buling's foot. Su Buling blinked and stepped on Kui Zioan's feet instead. Then the two began to go back and forth, like cats that refuse to admit defeat. "You stepped on me and I stepped on you." Outside was the ice and snow of the northern wilderness, but the small carriage was warm as spring. The two sat side by side in front of the couch, so quiet that only the sound of water splashing could be heard. The little sparrow stood alone beside him, feeling that he should not be in the car, but under it. After playing for a while, Kui Zioan realized that she had neglected the little sparrow, so she raised her hand to hold the little sparrow, leaned down, and put its little paws into the hot water. "It's just a bird, why should it run away? Chirp 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 dash." The little sparrow didn't care. Birds are not afraid of few but of uneven distribution. Zioan can soak the little bird, but can't? After retorting a few words, it collapsed into a ball and lay in Zioan's palm, shaking its little paws, and closed its eyes comfortably. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 798. The Northern Qi army occupied the north of the Yellow River, and Ningguoguan, which was originally used to resist the northern Xinjiang cavalry, became the Qi army's rear area. Although the war between the two countries had a great impact, the northern Qi dynasty came to restore the country after all. Apart from recruiting soldiers and raising money and food, the lives of the people at the bottom were not greatly disturbed. In the early morning, in Qingxia County on the bank of the Fen River, Lu Zixian, who had become a minister of the northern Qi dynasty, stood on the city wall, looking at the distant southwest with his hands behind his back, his eyes deep. Almost Wang Shiwei set the Central Plains Day, family sacrifice, don't forget to tell Nai Weng's taste. The people under the city wall came in and out as usual, but the soldiers guarding the city changed to soldiers and horses from the northern Qi dynasty. The Guanzhong army led by Guo Xianzhong was blocked in the Hedong area and would not be able to come back in a short time. At the bend of Fenhe River not far from the county seat, 2 horses walked through the fields and entered the sweet-scented Osman thus forest covered with snow. The horse is one brown and one white, and is covered with a riding jacket, but you can still feel its huge size, mainly because the rider on the horse is a bit too petite. On the brown chasing wind horse, Zhu Manzi is wearing a raincoat and a bamboo hat, with a long sword slung across his back. He is sitting in a very quack-like manner. Unfortunately, he is round and round, small and exquisite. Sitting on a tall horse, he does not look like a quack. It's even a little bit more cute out of thin air. On the white horse next to her, Chen Xining was much better. She was tall, with powerful legs that were round and strong. With the scimitar behind her waist and the bamboo hat on her head, she carried the aura of keep strangers out in her every move. The white chasing horse belonged to Ning Qingyi. After Xiao Qi agreed to Manzi to go out for a walk, Manzi borrowed the horse on the pretext of helping walk the horse, and then slipped away from Yueyang to Taiyuan. Zhu Manzi finally ran out and did not show any signs of fatigue from the long journey. He pointed to a big stone by the river with great interest and repeated the old saying. "Have you seen that big rock? I used to sit on it and fish with my dad. Even though my dad is a swordsman, his fishing skills are not as good as mine." Chen Xining glanced at the river longingly, slightly confused. "I wish the great sword master that even the bastard can't fall down. Isn't that true? Which pot won't be opened?" Zhu Manzi's expression froze, he waved his hand and skipped the topic, and came to the abandoned courtyard. "This is the place where my father lived in seclusion. That sword that shocked the world and made ghosts cry was practiced in that vegetable field. I remember that on the day when the sword was completed, there were gods weeping above, 9 dragons coming to court, and hundreds of ghosts below. Silence, all beasts bow their heads." After traveling together for so many days, Chen Xining had already figured out Manzi's character, and she praised him with a wink. "Oh! So powerful." Zhu Manzi rolled his eyes. "Old Chen, can you take some snacks? In the tea house, if you cheer so suddenly, you will be looked at as a fool." Chen Xining smiled with crooked eyebrows and pretended to listen carefully to the explanation. Zhu Manzi was satisfied now, but there was nothing to explain about the dilapidated yard and 2 vegetable fields on the edge of a mountain. She couldn't talk about being hung from a tree and spanked by her mother when she was a child, and then turned around. "First, head towards the woods. This is where the sword master lives in seclusion. You've finished reading it? I'll take you to the county town to eat at an old restaurant and then go back home." Chen Xining's mind was not on sightseeing at all, so she naturally had no nostalgia for this place. She walked slowly beside Manji, thought for a while and said, "We are already here. It is only more than 200 miles away from Taiyuan City. It is said that the Wang family's hometown in Taiyuan is there. I have been a member of the 5 powerful families in the Central Plains since I was a child. My father wanted to marry a legitimate daughter to be the queen, and everyone looked at it. No, I've always wanted to see why I'm so high-minded, and I just happened to be there." Zhu Manzi raised his hand slightly, stopped Chen Xining from speaking, and said helplessly, "Old Chen, you can't do this. You said you were just going out for a walk when we left Yueyang. You said Xiangyang was nearby. When we left Xiangyang, you said Luoyang was nearby. Then there were Hedong and Linfen. They were all blocked all the way to the north. Ningguo is closed. Where are you going to go to the grassland when you arrive in Taiyuan?" Well, Chen Xining really meant this. She asked casually on the way and learned that Su Buling had come to the north, but she didn't know exactly where he went. She directly said to go to Su Buling. She was afraid that Manzi would not agree, so she used this step-by-step method, coaxing Manzi all the way over. Seeing that Manzi finally couldn't bear it anymore, Chen Xining smiled sarcastically. You're all here. It's only about 400 miles to Liangcheng. Zui Fengma got there in 2 days. Didn't you say that Mr. Su has come to the north? Anyway, he has already come here. It's not a waste to stop by to meet him. Zhu Manzi also wanted to find Su Buling, otherwise he would not have crossed the Yellow River and reached Baiki's territory. She hesitated. I made an agreement with Sister Kikai to stroll around nearby, but ended up running so far without saying a word, and even ran to find Mr. Su. What if I go back and kick me out? Chen Xining blinked. We were just strolling around, near Daiyou. Logically speaking, this is also Daiyou's territory. We haven't even left Daiyou's door. Do you think that's right? I'm not stupid. My silly sister Kikai is not stupid either. Zhu Manzi frowned, hugged his bulging chest, thought for a moment, and nodded thoughtfully. It seems so. Then when the time comes, you explain to Sister Kikai that I might have misunderstood and you forcibly abducted me. No problem. Chen Xining nodded seriously, patted the horse and walked towards Ningguoguan in the north. Zhu Manzi almost wanted to die. Su Buling, there was a thunder bearer at the front, so of course he didn't say much, he drove his horse and trotted behind him. But I don't know where exactly Mr. Su is going. He is just relaxing with Miss Kui, and then going to Guiyan City to get a piece of wood or something. We can't go to the capital of Northern Qi, right? Chen Xining was quite confident about this and took out the napping little green snake from her sleeve. Ah Ching remembers Mr. Su's smell. Let's find a place we must pass by. As long as we find the place where Mr. Su stayed, we can follow the clues to catch him up. Didn't you ever work as a policeman? You don't even have this ability. Zhu Manzi puffed up his chest. Of course I have the ability, but Mobei is so big, where can we find the place where Mr. Su stayed? Since we are relaxing with the girl, we must go to a place with beautiful scenery. Just look for it slowly along the road. While chatting, the two girls rode horses and galloped towards Ningguoguan. Ningguoguan is less than 200 miles away from Qingxia County. With the horse's power, it won't take long to run across it with all its strength. But a good horse is hard to find. Zhu Manzi and Chen Xining both treat the horse as a treasure. It's okay. When you are walking, you would like to have someone carry the horse on its back, so naturally it will not run with all its strength. Like ordinary horses, it will rest for a while after running for 30 miles. With the Northern Qi army occupying the north of the Yellow River for nearly a year, Ningguoguan has become the rear area. In the past, there was no border access between the two sides. Now there are no restrictions. A large number of Northern Qi merchants came from Ningguoguan, and merchants from the pass went to Northern Qi. There were also many of them. Naturally, the Northern Qi army did not set up any barriers to stop trade within its jurisdiction. In the afternoon, Zhu Manzi and Chen Xining walked to Ningguo County together. As the New Year's Eve approached, the number of merchants increased, and it was getting dark again. The official road was crowded with horse teams and convoys, so the two simply dismounted and rested by the river, waiting for the road to clear up before leaving. Zhu Manzi likes to chat very much and won't stop talking as long as there are people around him. Chen Xining is also chatty and will never be the one to end a chat. The two of them get together, and the result is that the two horses' scalps are numb. Zhu Manzi could talk about everything from astronomy and geography to trivial matters. As they chatted, the topic somehow ended up on the relationship between men and women. When we were in Chang'an City, Mr. Su and I went to dig graves together in the middle of the night. Although Mr. Su looked cold on the outside, he was actually very capable of deceiving girls. He brought me back with him. Guess what he said? He wanted to take me with him. Am I going home? Chen Xining was naturally interested in this topic. She paid attention to the caravans along the way and asked, "How do you say it?" Zhu Manzi glanced left and right, then leaned forward and whispered, "Mr. Su said that his home has a very large sea of flowers. There is also a big bed in the sea of flowers, which can sleep 10 people without being crowded." Chen Xining blinked her beautiful peach blossom eyes and thought for a moment. "Why do you want such a big bed?" "Yes, I thought it was strange. I didn't believe it. I really wanted to take a look. Later, I followed Mr. Su to Suzhou and found that he really had such a big bed, and it could really sleep 10 people. When Zhu Manzi said this, he realized that the joke was a bit naughty and ruined his innocent and cute image, so he coughed lightly. Chen Xining didn't believe that Su Buling would do such a ridiculous thing as 10 women at night, so naturally she just took it as a joke, shook her head and said, "Mr. Su is a bit sentimental, but he is also very responsible. He takes good care of the girls around him." Zhu Manzi nodded, "Of course, Mr. Su is different from those princes and noble sons who judge people by their appearance, and he is very manly. Unlike my father, a majestic swordsman, who was trained by his wife so that he did not dare to talk back." Chen Xining was quietly listening to the interesting stories about the contemporary swordsman's strict wife control, but she felt something was wrong in her heart. Looking around, he saw a caravan passing by on the road in the distance, with the flag of Guan'ei Trading Company flying. There were a dozen or so cars with quite a lot of people. There were dozens of warriors dressed as bodyguards around them. From temperament to physique, they were absolutely ordinary. Especially the man at the front who is carrying a fine iron spear, sitting on a horse with a straight face, and his back alone makes people feel fearful. Chen Xining is very skilled in martial arts, and only people of her level can feel the pressure from the strong. The motorcade was slowly passing by on the official road, and the curtain of a carriage parallel to them was opened slightly, revealing the profile of a middle-aged man wearing ordinary clothes. There was also a middle-aged scholar inside, looking at on their side. Chen Xining was cautious by nature, so she was naturally wary if she didn't know the details. She pinched the cigarette pill in her sleeve. However, before she could take a closer look, the middle-aged man in the carriage looked away and continued to look away, as if he just glanced at it casually. The scenery on the roadside, and then the curtains were lowered. Zhu Manzi was still talking about her father being greedy and her mother not letting her in. She noticed that Chen Xining frowned and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Chen Xining didn't know the details of the caravan. For the sake of safety, she couldn't stir up trouble. She got on her horse and walked elsewhere, casually saying, "This road is not very safe. Let's go somewhere else to exit the customs." Oh. Zhu Manzi didn't feel anything strange. He knew that Chen Xining was good at martial arts, so he didn't ask any questions. He got on his horse and followed Chen Xining, and continued to talk. "Wait a moment, refining. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce." Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 799. The Zhang family's totem in the northern Qi dynasty is double dragons looking at flying swallows, and the capital is named Guiyan City, which means swallows returning home. It is a pity that after being driven out of the central plains before Jiazi, Guiyan City has become the capital of a country comparable to Chang'an, but the day when northern Yan returns to the south is still far away. In the cold winter of the 12th lunar month, snowflakes fell on the thick and towering city. A carriage passed through the city gate under Fiyan and drove south in the wind and snow. On the carriage, Zhou Qingkaiu, who was wearing a silver fox fur, looked at the endless snowfield, with a slightly sad look in his deep eyes. Starting from Zhou Jixian, the founder of the country, the position of imperial master of the northern Qi dynasty, passed down from father to son and from master to disciple, has been held by people with the surname Zhou, and it has been passed down to this day. The power of the northern Qi state preceptor was far greater than that of the prime minister of the Central Plains dynasty. He was almost on an equal footing with the monarch, and in some cases could even overwhelm the monarch. But great power also means great responsibility, which is not so easy to assume. Zhou Qingkaiu is the apprentice of the previous national master. Since the day he came out of the mountain, he has been the strongest chess player in the world and the top martial artist. Just like the ancestor Zhou Jixian, no emperor or general in the world dares to look down upon him, including the senior from the same sect who lives in seclusion in Yuelu Mountain. 20 years after he succeeded the imperial guard, Zhou Qingkaiu took over the chessboard and accumulated his current strength step by step. He entered the pass thousands of miles in one go and defeated Daiyu's cavalry to a complete defeat. If nothing unexpected happens, within 3 years Zhou Qingkaiu will be able to sweep across the country and create a prosperous dynasty that has never appeared since ancient times. It will not be said to be the most prosperous, but it must be the largest in territory. But this big chess game in the world can never be solved by one person. The old masters in Yuelu Mountain had their jaws dropped at times, and Zhou Qingkaiu was the same. The accident happened after all. A vassal prince appeared out of nowhere and almost ran rampant on the chessboard, disrupting all the situations. It felt like he had worked hard to lay out the entire game, and when he was about to finish, the opponent said 5 pieces in a row, and then just win this game of chess. This way of winning is obviously against the rules, but Zhou Qingkaiu can't help it, because in this big chessboard in the world, there are never rules, and the rules are always set by the strongest. The Song dynasty was neatly wiped out and held the emperor to order the princes. It was supposed to be a scene where Daiyu fell apart and fell into civil war, but Su Buling completely unreasonably took out a big killer weapon like artillery. Now South Vietnam has another surrendering without a fight directly turned the disadvantage of being surrounded by enemies on all sides into a huge advantage over the other heroes. If nothing was done, Zhou Qingkaiu could predict what would happen next year. Ziliang's army crossed the river, and with the power of artillery, destroyed the 4 kings in the east, and then Daiyu unified, relying on the Central Plains' powerful financial, material, and manpower, to conquer the country in one fell swoop counterattack into Mobei, leaving Jiangqi in the history books. It's easy to predict the future situation, but it's harder to change it. If Zhou Qingkaiu cannot figure out how to make artillery, he will never be able to gain an advantage in armaments. The only way left is to unite his allies and pool the efforts of all parties to first destroy this monster entrenched in the pass. In the carriage, Yan Huilin, the sword fairy of the northern Qi dynasty, and Sui Jinshan, one of the 9 ministers of the northern Qi dynasty, were sitting near Zhou Qingkaiu. In the Sui dynasty, the mountain official paid homage to the guest and was in charge of the foreign affairs of the vassal country. At this time, there was some doubt on his face and he said softly, "After all, the 2 Yus in the east and west come from the same lineage. If Dongyu forms an alliance with our dynasty, it will offend the public. Even if it succeeds, if we want to join forces to destroy 11 Yu, we will still have stumbling blocks. No one wants to contribute first. This time the envoy come here, I think the possibility of suing for peace is greater, and I beg our court to stop the army temporarily and not to conquer Qingzhou and other places to relieve the pressure on Dongyu." Zhou Qingkaiu shook his head. The Su family is building warships aggressively. In the spring, they will definitely cross the river and sweep south of the Yangtze River. Even if I don't attack Qingzhou, Dongyu will not be able to stop me. The counselors under Song Shaoying are not blind and can see this. Sui Jinshan thought for a moment, nodded slightly, and then said, "The envoy has passed Ningguoguan today and will arrive at Guiyan City in the near future. The prince and crown ceremony will be held soon. As the imperial master cannot be absent. Isn't it a bit too polite to go and greet him in person at this time?" The status of the northern Qi state preceptor was high, and the envoy sent by Dongyu was at most a lobbyist with some status. According to etiquette, it was the highest standard for Sui to go into the mountains to greet him. Zhou Qingkai went there in person, and the northern Qi state was downgraded. Obviously not suitable. Zhou Qingkai shook his head at this. There are many counselors under the Su family, and there is also the old immortal Yuelu Mountain who is behind the plan. Even if the news about my contact with Dongyu is not leaked, they will definitely be able to guess it. No, maybe it's not easy for Dongyu's envoy to make it to Guiyan City alive. Northern Qi sword immortal Yan returned to the forest and had been sitting beside her with her eyes closed to rest. When she heard these words, she opened her eyes. The top Grand Master in Zio, Eunuch Xia, died. The dead soldier was missing. Song Ying, Lao Yi, and Tang Jiao died suddenly under Su Buling's sword. Hua Jingting returned to the Xiao family in Huainan, and even the Grand Masters in Nanyu were the only ones who can get on the stage now are Sidu Yuejin, Yujulu, and Kan Yunzi. Kan Yunzi can only run fast, and Yujulu cannot leave King Su's side. Yujin is already old. Even if he comes here, he will at most be on a par with me. Who else can go deep into the tiger's den and attack the envoy? There are countless warriors in the world, but there are only a handful of people who have reached the top of the world. Except for a few Shen-Shui bastards who are hiding in the mountains and cultivating immortals, everyone else naturally knows the realm of Yan Huilin. Although Sui Jinshan was not a member of the martial arts world, he had naturally heard of these things, and he was a little confused at this time. Zhou Qingkai thought for a moment, Su Buling is a bit reckless. I doubt he will come here in person. When these words came out, Yan Huilin and Sui Jinshan were stunned for a moment, but after thinking about it, they felt that it was true. Apart from Su Buling himself, the Su family no longer had any top fighters available. Sui Jinshan pondered for a moment, if this is true, why do we need to form an alliance? Prince Su has only one son. Keeping Su Buling in northern Qi is more useful than the millions of mobs in Dongyu. Yan Huilin shook his head. With Su Buling's current record, the national teacher and I can kill him together, but if he wants to run, we can't stop him. Does the national teacher have any arrangements? Zhou Qingkai looked at the flying snow outside the window and said calmly. I have sent letters to Banmianfo and Master, and the spies in various places have also strengthened their vigilance. As long as Su Buling dares to step into northern Qi, he will never leave again. However, Su Buling's whereabouts are difficult to track, and it is difficult to know in advance. He may not really dare to come. I have to trouble brother Yan for this matter. Yan Huilin knew that this was to let him be bait. As a warrior, he has a sense of pride that no one else can do it. He also wanted to meet the rumored number one in the world. Just give your orders, national teacher. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 800. The lake is as flat as a mirror, and the sky and the earth are silent. The flying snow from willow catkins swayed down and landed on the water reflecting the sky. Without causing any ripples, it merged with the mirror surface. Su Buling led the wind-chasing horse and trudged forward on the knee-deep snow. When he reached the end of the snow field, his vision suddenly opened up, and the boundless sea of gourds appeared in front of him, as if it were spread out among the desolate snow fields. Of a mirror. Calabash Lake is later known as Liangcheng Dehe Lake. It is located in the inner hinterland of Mobei. Its beautiful scenery spreads far and wide to the central plains. However, only a few people in the central plains can visit it. Now standing by the Calabash Sea, although I cannot see the grand scene of the springtide of the waves of Daihai are swimming in the waves, and the fog and thrushes are singing on Zhongshan Mountain, the empty and lonely sky and water are equally refreshing. Hello. Kui Zioan stepped out of the carriage, stood outside the carriage, made a trumpet with her hands, and called out loudly. The sound was very loud and spread far between heaven and earth. He looked like a child who had climbed to the top of the mountain for the first time. He was so childish and cute. The little sparrow was frightened and quickly moved away from the silly woman. It landed on the head of the horse chasing the wind and was admiring the scenery that it had never seen before. Su Buling turned around and said, "There used to be swans here, but it's a pity that we can't see them anymore in winter." Kui Zioan put one hand on her waist, looked at the beautiful scenery of the empty world, then turned her eyes to Su Buling, who was standing by the water, and thought for a while. It's all the same. The phrase all the same is not intriguing. Kui Zioan has traveled such a long distance, from the snow-covered sea of peach blossoms to Ziliang where the spring flowers are blooming, and then from Ziliang to Chudi, and then from Chudi to Mobei. What I have been pursuing has never been a flower or a grass, but a person. When you are in front of this person, even if you are in a deserted wilderness, you will still look stunning in the world. This person is not here, and the flowers are blooming all over the city. What does it have to do with her? Kui Zioan looked at Su Buling, opened her arms on the carriage, and raised the corners of her mouth with a smile. Su Buletinling looked a little helpless and walked up to him and raised his hand to help Kui Zioan get out of the car. It's just that Kui Zioan didn't want to use the normal way to get off the car in this place where they only had each other. She leaned forward and jumped directly. Ha! Su Buling was slightly startled, and quickly caught Kui Zioan in a bear hug, which was a little funny. What you do? Kui Zioan landed on the ground. Although she was still weak, her face was full of smiles. I'm so happy. I've done both reading thousands of books and traveling thousands of miles. Thank you for accompanying me so far. Su Buling was already used to Zioan's jumping thoughts and shook his head. There are roads in the mountain of books, and hard work is the path, and there is no limit to the sea of learning. The boat is made by hard work. Wherever we are now, the road will never be completed one day. Kui Zioan's eyes were always clear and clear of distractions, and she never concealed her inner thoughts. At this moment, there was obviously something unusual in her eyes. She looked up at Su Buling, their eyes met for a moment, and then she suddenly said, "Do you like Auntie?" Su Buling's pure and flawless expression froze slightly. He had come so far, and there was no need to express his feelings in words. It was just that these words that were supposed to be full of romance and sweetness sounded strange. I like it, but I don't like Aunt. Auntie is so exciting, isn't that what you always thought? I don't. Humph. Kui Zioan stared at Su Buling's eyes, not believing it at all. After staring for a moment, she stood on tiptoes slightly, trying to get in front of Su Buling. It's just that Kui Zioan's body is as slim as a willow, and she is still a little far behind when she stands on tiptoes. Seeing that Su Buling didn't react at all, she pursed her lips. Out of reach. Su Buletinling took a breath. The beautiful face of Ruhua was so close in front of him, but his mind was a little empty. He hesitated for a moment, and then he was slightly possessed. Kui Zioan stood on tiptoes again, imitating her mother's example, holding Su Buling's cheek, and said ouch. The four lips met, and the originally silent world became completely silent. The snowflakes fell silently, and the lake, as flat as a mirror, reflected the two men and women embracing each other, so clearly that one could not distinguish between the two worlds separated by the horizontal line, which one was real and which one was a reflection. But it doesn't matter, after all, whether it is real or reflected, it is the same at this time. The black wind-chasing horse, which had pulled the carriage for thousands of miles, snorted twice in the ice and snow, and missed the big white horse a little. The little sparrow standing on the head of the horse chasing the wind turned its chubby head dissatisfied, confused about who it should be thinking about now. Twitter. After waiting for a long time, the little sparrow finally couldn't bear it any longer. It flapped its small wings and flew between the two of them, huddled in the gap between the chins, as if looking for a sense of participation. Su Buling put his arms around Kui Zion's waist, his eyes only filled with calmness and no desire. It's not that he pretends to be a gentleman at this time, it's simply because from the day he saw Kui Zion, it was difficult for him to think in that direction. Kui Zion is like a mirror, which can reflect everything in the heart. The hidden form makes people feel ashamed. But Kui Zion is obviously not a mirror, just a woman, she will think that way. After Kui Zion hugged and nibbled for a while, her eyes were still clear, she let go of her lips and looked at the stupid big man in front of her. Why don't you do it? When you were a mother, you always put your hands, here. Kui Zion took Su Buling's hand and placed it on her conscience. Su Buling was really a little embarrassed, because Kui Zion could see through his mind, but he saw that Kui Zion was a flawless nephrite, and he didn't know where to start. Seeing Zion taking action on her own, Su Buling was not polite and tentatively shook her fingers, which were very soft. Kui Zion shivered, then pushed Su Buling away, holding the neglected little sparrow in her hands, and walked towards the carriage. Okay, I'm fine, you can go get down to business. Su Buling knew that Kui Zion's heart knot had been resolved long ago, but the physical weakness could not be cured by psychological changes. He licked the red rouge on his lips, stepped forward, picked up Kui Zion, and placed him on the carriage. Kui Zion had never resisted, and it was the same at this time. She just took off the small mahogany sign from her waist, feeling a little worried. When you were impure in the past, I would engrave it, but no matter how pure your mind is now, it's not right. How should I engrave it? Su Buling was very experienced in this. He looked at the two characters on the wooden sign and said with a smile. Leave it for now. I'll finish the two straight characters later and then continue carving. Kui Zion blinked. Xiao Xianger had never told her the meaning of the characters on the small wooden sign until now. He only said that it was an interesting thing, and she had never guessed it. But since it's something interesting, there's no need to ask. Kui Zion nodded, put away the mahogany sign, and got into the carriage. Su Buling jumped onto the carriage and took one last look at the beautiful calabash sea. Then he whipped his horsewhip and headed for Liangcheng. It was just a horse chasing a horse pulling a carriage, and it took a long time to get to this damn place. They didn't even take a sip of water. The two of them slapped their heads and prepared to leave, feeling a little dissatisfied. Treating a horse like a human being, right? Perhaps this was the first time that Zui Fengma didn't obey Su Buletinling's order. He ran to the water and drank 2 mouthfuls of cool lake water before pulling the frame away with satisfaction. Circles of ripples spread across the boundless lake until the water and sky meet. When the ripples subsided, the vast silence returned between heaven and earth. However, the beautiful lakeshore always leaves something special in people's minds.